Lucille Ball sat in the interview chair, laughing. Then suddenly she stopped, turned serious, and said to Johnny Carson, "I've never told this to anyone, Johnny." Everything changed after that moment. The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. Studio One at NBC Burbank. March 1978. The audience was packed, the band was ready, and America's most beloved comedienne had just walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. Lucille Ball. Lucy Ricardo. The woman who had made the entire country laugh for decades. At 66 years old, she was a living legend, and Johnny Carson treated her appearances like the special events they were. She settled into the guest chair with practiced ease, crossing her legs, that famous smile lighting up the studio. Johnny leaned back in his chair, blue cue cards in hand, ready for what he assumed would be another delightful conversation filled with Hollywood stories and that signature Lucy humor. "Lucy, it's always a pleasure to have you here," Johnny said, his voice warm with genuine affection. "Oh, Johnny, you say that to all the girls," Lucy shot back, and the audience erupted in laughter. They fell into their rhythm easily. Johnny asked about her new show. Lucy told a funny story about Desi Jr. The band played a soft underscore. Ed McMahon chuckled at all the right moments. It was television perfection. The kind of effortless chemistry that only comes from mutual respect and years of experience. Johnny shuffled his cue cards, preparing his next question. "You know, Lucy, you've been in this business for over 40 years now. Looking back, what would you say was your proudest moment?" Lucy smiled, opening her mouth to answer with what was probably a prepared anecdote. But then something shifted. Her smile faltered slightly. She looked at Johnny, really looked at him, and her expression changed. "Can I tell you something, Johnny?" Her voice was quieter now, missing the performative energy from moments before. Johnny sensed the shift immediately. He set down his cue cards. "Of course." Lucy took a breath. The studio was still smiling, still expecting a punchline. But Johnny saw something in her eyes, something vulnerable and raw that didn't match the legendary comedienne sitting across from him. "I've never told this to anyone, Johnny," she said softly. Carson stopped mid-interview. The entire studio froze. The audience went quiet. Not the anticipatory quiet before a joke, a different kind of silence. The kind that happens when people sense something real is about to unfold. Johnny leaned forward, both elbows on his desk now, giving Lucy his complete attention. The cue cards lay forgotten. Ed McMahon's smile faded into concerned attention. "Go ahead, Lucy," Johnny said gently. "Take your time." Lucy's hands gripped the armrests of her chair. She looked down for a moment, composing herself, then back up at Johnny. "When Desi and I divorced in 1960, she began, her voice steady but thick with emotion. "Everyone thought it was because of his drinking, his affairs, the lifestyle. And those things were part of it, certainly." She paused. The band had stopped their underscore. Doc Severinsen held his trumpet silently, watching. "But there was something else. Something I've carried for 18 years. And I think it's time I said it out loud." Johnny didn't move. Didn't interrupt. He simply nodded, giving her the space to continue. "The real reason I divorced Desi," Lucy said, her voice breaking slightly, "was because I was terrified I was becoming him." The confession hung in the air. The studio audience was completely still, 300 people holding their collective breath. To understand what Lucy meant, you need to understand what happened in the final years of I Love Lucy. By 1957, I Love Lucy was the most successful show in television history. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz weren't just stars. They were titans of the industry, running Desilu Productions, pioneering the three-camera technique, changing how television was made. But behind the scenes, the marriage was crumbling. Desi's drinking had gotten worse. His infidelities were becoming impossible to ignore. The pressure of maintaining both a marriage and a business empire was crushing them both. What the public didn't know, what Lucy had never spoken about publicly, was that she had started drinking too. Not like Desi. Not the all-day, destructive alcoholism that was destroying his health. But enough. Enough to take the edge off after 18-hour workdays. Enough to sleep at night despite the anxiety. Enough to numb the pain of watching her marriage disintegrate. "I would finish filming," Lucy said to Johnny, her eyes distant with memory. "And I'd go to my dressing room and pour myself a drink. Just one, I told myself. Just to unwind. Just to relax." She took a shaky breath. "But then it was 2 drinks. Then 3. And I started looking forward to that moment all day. Not seeing my children. Not the work I loved. Just that drink waiting for me in my dressing room." The cameras stayed locked on her face. Every technical person in the studio, every crew member who had been setting up for the next segment, had stopped to watch. "One night," Lucy continued, "I was putting little Lucy to bed. She was maybe 7 years old. And she looked at me and said, 'Mommy, you smell like Daddy.'" Lucy's voice cracked completely. Tears began rolling down her face, but she didn't stop. "That's when I knew. I was following him down that same path. And if I stayed in that marriage, if I kept trying to hold together something that was already broken, I was going to lose myself completely. I was going to become the thing I was most afraid of." Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Johnny Carson sat perfectly still. His eyes were glistening. Ed McMahon had tears running down his face, not even trying to hide them. The audience didn't make a sound. Lucy wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smudging her carefully applied makeup. "I filed for divorce 3 days later. Everyone thought I was being cruel. That I was giving up on him. That I was choosing my career over my family." She looked directly at Johnny. "But I was choosing to survive. I was choosing not to let alcohol destroy me the way it was destroying him. And I've never told anyone that because I was ashamed. Because admitting I had a problem felt like admitting weakness. And Lucy Ricardo is never weak, right?" She laughed bitterly. "But I'm not Lucy Ricardo. I'm Lucille Ball. And I was weak. I was scared. And I was drowning." Johnny stood up. He didn't announce it, didn't make a show of it. He simply walked around his desk, crossed the small space between them, and sat on the edge of the platform beside Lucy's chair. The cameras followed him, capturing what would become one of the most iconic moments in television history. Johnny took Lucy's hand. Not as an interviewer. As a friend. "Lucy," he said quietly, "do you know what I just heard?" She shook her head, unable to speak. "I heard the bravest thing anyone has said on this show in 20 years. You just told millions of people that you're human. That you struggled. That you made the hardest choice of your life to save yourself." He squeezed her hand. "That's not weakness, Lucy. That's the strongest thing I've ever heard." Backstage, he made a choice no producer would have ever allowed. The control room was in chaos. The director was screaming into his headset about the schedule, about the commercial breaks they were missing, about the other segments that needed to be filmed. Producer Fred de Cordova stood behind the director, watching the monitors. "Keep rolling," he said quietly. "Fred, we're going to run over. I don't care. Keep rolling." On stage, Johnny was still holding Lucy's hand. The audience had started to applaud, soft at first, then building, then becoming a standing ovation. Not the excited applause of entertainment, but the reverent applause of people witnessing courage. Lucy was crying openly now, her famous composure completely gone, replaced by the raw humanity of someone who had carried a secret for nearly 2 decades and had finally set it down. "How long have you been sober?" Johnny asked gently. 18 years, Lucy said, her voice hoarse. "The day I filed for divorce, I poured every bottle in my house down the sink. And I never touched it again." "Did Desi know? About your drinking?" Lucy nodded. "He knew. We never talked about it, but he knew. And I think that's why he never fought the divorce. He understood what I was doing, even if I couldn't explain it at the time." Johnny looked at the camera. Camera 1, the one that fed directly to millions of homes across America. Folks, I want to say something. What Lucy just shared took more courage than anything I've seen in this business. Addiction doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care if you're famous or successful or beloved. And asking for help, admitting vulnerability, choosing to save yourself, that's not weakness. That's heroism. He turned back to Lucy. Thank you for trusting us with this. All of us. Lucy smiled through her tears. You know what's funny, Johnny? I came here tonight planning to talk about my new show. Tell some cute stories about the old days. Keep everything light and fun. What changed? You asked me about my proudest moment. And I realized, my proudest moment wasn't Lucy Ricardo or any character I played. It was the moment I chose to live. Really live. Not just exist, not just perform, but actually be present for my children and myself. She looked out at the audience. So if anyone out there is struggling with something they can't talk about, something they're ashamed of, something that's slowly destroying them, please ask for help. Choose to survive. You're worth it. But this was the moment no one in the studio, nor anyone at home, ever saw coming. Johnny reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small coin, a simple bronze medallion on a chain. Lucy, I want to show you something, he said quietly. I don't talk about this on air. Almost nobody knows. But I've been sober for 12 years. The studio gasped. Lucy's eyes went wide. Johnny held up the medallion. This is my 12-year sobriety chip. I carry it everywhere. And every day, I look at it and remember that choosing to stop wasn't giving up. It was growing up. Lucy stared at him, tears streaming down her face. Johnny, I had no idea. I know. Because we don't talk about it. We hide it. We're ashamed. But maybe. He looked at the audience, then back at Lucy. Maybe if people like us, people who seem like we have it all together, maybe if we're honest about our struggles, other people won't feel so alone. He unclasped the chain and placed the medallion in Lucy's hand. I want you to have this. Johnny, I can't. Yes, you can. Because tonight, you gave me something more valuable than this coin. You gave me permission to be honest too. And I want you to carry this as a reminder that you're not alone. You never were. Lucy clutched the medallion to her chest, sobbing. Johnny put his arm around her shoulders and just held her while the audience stood and applauded and cried and bore witness to two legends being courageously, beautifully human. The Tonight Show didn't air any other segments that night. Johnny told the producers to cut everything else. Just this. Just this moment of honesty and connection and two people helping each other carry what they'd been carrying alone. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The interview ran 23 minutes, an eternity in talk show time. When it finally ended, Lucy and Johnny sat on that stage for another 10 minutes after the cameras stopped, just talking quietly while the audience slowly filed out, many of them in tears. The episode aired 3 days later. NBC received over 50,000 calls within the first week, not complaints, but thank yous. People sharing their own stories of addiction and recovery. People saying they decided to ask for help after watching Lucy's confession. Lucille Ball kept Johnny's sobriety medallion until she died in 1989. In her will, she requested it be returned to Johnny with a note. You gave me the courage to stop hiding. Thank you for seeing me, not just Lucy. Johnny Carson wore that medallion on a chain under his shirt for the rest of his hosting career. After he retired in 1992, he had it framed alongside a photograph from that night. Lucy crying, Johnny holding her hand, both of them being real. The inscription below reads, "The night television stopped performing and started healing. March 1978. Lucy called Johnny every year on the anniversary of that interview. Not to reminisce. Just to say, still here. Still sober. Thank you." When she died in 1989, Johnny didn't do his monologue that night. He walked onto the stage, told the audience about Lucy's courage, and dedicated the entire show to her memory. "She taught me," Johnny said, his voice breaking, "that the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth. Especially when it costs you everything." That night changed late-night television forever. Not because of ratings or awards. Because two legends chose honesty over image. And millions of people watching at home realized they weren't alone.